and then the National Guard being sent in without the governor having asked for it. How is that unfurling in D.C. right now?
So I would say, it was one of those things where President Trump wanted this fight because it plays to one of his key messages that won him the election, and that was on immigration. But, in terms of how it plays in terms of things like the one big beautiful bill or to tariffs or to the, that's really not happening just yet. There was a lot of discussions about Medicaid cuts and SNAP reductions and Inflation Reduction Acts. And those messages are very difficult for Republicans, but they're still moving forward. So when it comes to Los Angeles and this idea of troops, I think President Trump certainly wants that to try and deflect some of that message away from Medicaid cuts, for example. The question is, we anticipate the one big beautiful bill going into July. Will California go into July? Time will only tell.
So where are we on either, cuts to expenses like Medicaid or new revenue like taxes? Where are we in that discussion these days?
Yeah, so, there's really three things that came out of the House bill. It's the Medicaid, it's the SNAP benefits, and it's the Inflation Reduction Act. Now, each one of those was given a certain time frame of when those tax credits, and in the Medicaid cuts, an example of when they would actually take into effect. Now, the House conservatives insisted for Medicaid, for example, that it would start in December 2026, the Inflation Reduction Act 2028, all this being said. Now, what the Senate is doing at the moment is looking how to moderate it. And so Senator John Thune gave a statement just last week saying that we're going to anticipate a lot of that pushing back. So what we're telling our clients is that go back to the original House and Ways and Means text, where for a lot of these tax cuts and a lot of these tax extensions, they would start taking place in like 2028 or 2029 beyond Trump's rest of his administration. That's where we think the Senate goes. Now, when it comes to Medicaid in particular, obviously it's a very difficult vote for a lot of Republicans that have either constituencies or states that are heavily development or heavily reliant on Medicaid. We think that most likely that those ultimate decisions, if you will, are going to be votes to kick the can and push those cuts off so that if a future president wants to come back and revisit it, that person would have flexibility.
Right. Interesting. In terms of the feud between Elon Musk and President Trump, I guess it's a twofer. Like, one, where are we with that? But then more importantly, kind of what is Doge doing within the government without Elon Musk?
So it seems like we're sort of at a truce at the moment. Now, I say that, obviously, it could change almost instantly. But in terms of where we are with that, the White House sent what is known as a rescissions package, trying to codify around $9 billion in cuts. Now, this is mostly USAID, state, and NPR. We looked at it from an investment point of view, and we actually don't think there's much there market moving. But the reason why it's important to talk about is that this is the first of many rescissions packages that will come probably throughout the rest of this year. Now, the White House can essentially say, look, Doge has identified these $1 billion number of cuts. Now we need Congress to go in there and actually approve this. Now, you don't need a filibuster. It's just a majority vote in the House, a majority vote in the Senate. But obviously, there are differences between what Doge wants to do and what senators want to do. This happened one time in 2018, and the Republicans just said, look, I can't vote to cut these things that are ultimately going to impact my district. So we are going to continue to see things like clean energy, tax credits, loans, grants, and so forth like that. Those rescissions packages are most likely coming later this year.
Last week, Alex and I were broadcasting remotely from Washington, D.C. area. And one afternoon, I was walking around town, walking past the Department of Agriculture, which is a massive building taking up like a whole square block. And it was quitting time, and people were coming out by the thousands. It goes back to, we don't know what these people do, and I'm sure they're doing good work. But now that Elon Musk is out of the picture, is Doge still a thing? Are people just going to come back into the federal workforce now?
Well, anecdotally, I would say, yes, Doge is still a thing. Just talking to my friends and family around the region, they certainly are still active. And there are Doge employees at pretty much all of these agencies. But I would say is that rather than being the bully pulpit of Elon Musk, now each agency leader is the one that actually has to make that decision. For example, over at the Federal Reserve, Doge isn't there yet, or as much as I can tell, they're not there yet. But Fed Vice Chair for Supervision, if you look at Michelle Bowman of her speech for last week, it had a lot of Doge elements to it in terms of saying, look, we need to get cut. We need to actually become more streamlined and so forth like that. So the idea of Doge is certainly going through the agencies, but the bully pulpit of Elon Musk isn't there. So you will see cuts and you will see streamlining efforts continuing throughout the rest of this year.
All right, Nathan, thanks a lot. Super appreciate Nathan Dean, Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Policy Analyst, joining us from Washington, D.C. All right, the economic data that we got just at the top of the hour had